Welcome back. Now we've got our Bootstrap project all set up. Let's take a look at the final project and take a look at what we're going to be building in this section. So next we're going to be adding the HTML for the header section. The header section contains a navigation bar across the top, which is going to have the logo in the top left. And also on the right hand side we're going to have the menu links. We're going to add a large background image and also the featured text in the center, which is going to be both horizontally and vertically aligned. The text and the image is going to be static for now, but once we get onto the WordPress section later on in the course, the user will be able to change the background and also the text. So to get started with the header section, let's head over to our text editor and let's get rid of the sidebar for now. So if we scroll down, we can delete the Hello World H1 heading, and then let's start with a comment for the header section. Okay, so the header section will be between the header tags, and we're going to get started with the navigation bar at the top of the page. So that will be in nav tags, and it's going to have some Bootstrap classes. The first one will be navbar, and then navbar default. So we'll be using a lot of these Bootstrap classes as we go through the project. If you're curious to know exactly what each one of these is doing, we can go over to the Bootstrap CSS in the CSS folder. And if we look for the bootstrap.css, for example, if we look for navbar default, so head into Bootstrap CSS, and if you use your text editor's find function, and then type in the class you want to look for, so I'm going to look for navbar default. This will then take you to the section of the CSS which applies. So you can see that by adding the navbar default, it includes various borders and background colors. So we can use this if you want to know exactly what's going on in the CSS behind the scenes, but it's also worth bearing in mind that any of these Bootstrap classes we have included, we can also add to or override in our own custom CSS file. So next we're going to add a div with the class of container fluid. And again, container fluid is a Bootstrap class. You can either use container fluid, which provides a fluid full width div, or we can use the container class by itself, which includes a div with a fixed width. And then within the container fluid, we're going to create a new div with a class of navbar header. And within this div, this is going to be the section, which includes the information for screen readers. And also if we take a look at the finished project, you can see if we shrink the browser down, it's a fully responsive website. So once we get below a certain size, the navigation menu turns into a drop-down menu. So the header is also going to contain the information for the drop-down button. So let's start with that button now. So the button is going to have a type of button. We'll add some Bootstrap classes. The first one is navbar toggle, and then collapsed. It's going to be collapsed by default, so we can add the data toggle to be equal to collapse, and the data target is equal to dot navbar hyphen collapse. So what the data target is doing, this is linking the button to a div with a class of navbar collapse, and we'll create that after the button. And nested inside the button, we're going to add the 3 icon bars, which are on the drop down button. So the first one, these will all be between span tags. So the first span tag will just be a class for screen readers. So this will have a class of SR only, and the text for the screen reader will be toggle navigation. And then next we'll add another span with a class of icon bar. So this is the first of the 3 icon bars. So it's going to be exactly the same for 2 more. So we can just copy and paste or duplicate that. And just change the spelling there. There we go. Okay, so let's check that on the preview. There we go. So on the smaller screen, we've got the drop down button appearing there. And that should disappear once we get to a certain size. There we go. So next we need to add the logo to the top left hand corner and also the 3 navigation links. So to start, the logo is going to go just below the button, but still within the navbar header div. And this is going to be a link. So we'll put the href tags, and this is going to link back to the index page, which is index.html. And the Bootstrap class is navbar brand. And because our logo is simply text, we can just type this in there. So tranquil spa. So that's the end of the navbar header section. So I'm just going to add some comments. So we'll call this the navbar header. And we'll end that there. So just below the navbar header div, the next div will have the 3 links of home, blog and latest news. So the container div will have the class of collapse. And then next we'll add the navbar collapse class, which we used for the data target. And then within this collapse section, we'll add our unordered list and add our Bootstrap classes of nav, navbar nav, and also navbar right, which pushes the navigation links to the right hand side of the div. And then 3 list items, which are also links. So the href for the first link is for home, so this will link to the index.html, and the text was home. And we need 2 more list items. The second one is for the blog.html, and change the name. And the third link is for the latest news section. Now I'm just going to leave the link empty for this one. We'll be creating our template for the blog section using Bootstrap, but when it comes to the latest news section, this is going to be dynamically generated in WordPress. We're basically going to be using the blog page, but we're just going to use a filter just to filter out the blog posts to be the latest news category. And then let's add some comments. So let's first add a comment to the navbar collapse closing div. And then the last one is for the container fluid. Now we can close that up there. So let's check that out in the browser and see how that's looking. Great, so we've got the logo appearing. We've got the 3 links on the right hand side, and shrinking the browser down, that drops to a drop down button, which expands to show the 3 links. And by the way, because this drop down button is working, this also shows that our JavaScript, our Bootstrap JavaScript, which is included in the JS folder, is all linked correctly and it's all working. Down at the very bottom of the page, you can see that the links are already included in the Bootstrap template, both for jQuery and also the Bootstrap JavaScript. So we know that's all working correctly. So now we've got our navigation bar complete. Next, we're going to start on the background image and also the text. And we're going to call this the feature section. So we're going to put this just below the navigation. So let's copy that header and then paste this just below the closing nav tag, but still within the header. And I'm going to call this the feature section. So because the feature section has a large background image, which we want to stretch to the full width of the page, we're going to make use of the Bootstrap container fluid again. And then within the container fluid, we need to add another Bootstrap class of row, and also our own custom class, which is feature. So we can link to that in the CSS in the next video. And then add the path to the image. So image source. So we've got a images folder within the project, and then the large background image is called lakebg.jpg. And add some alt text in there. I'm just going to add lake background. So let's check if that's working okay. Head back into our project. So there we go. So there's a large image appearing in the background. So let's next add the text which overlays the image. So the text will be going in its own div, and we'll add a custom class of feature text. And then inside this container, we'll add our text in the p tags. So the text was fully responsive, premium spa theme for WordPress. And then I'm going to add some break tags after the word responsive and also after the word theme, just to split that up onto different lines. So if we go back into the browser and see how that's looking, we won't have the text appearing over the image just yet because we need to add some CSS for that to work. But the text is appearing just below, so we don't need to worry about that just yet. We'll solve that in the next video. So we'll just finish this section off by adding some closing comments. First of all, to the fluid container, and then to the div with the class of row, and then the feature text. So there we go. So that's the end of the HTML for the header section. If you join me in the next video, we'll continue with the header section by adding the CSS, and we'll also take a look at the Bootstrap rows and grid system.